Hi, my name is Paul Capodanno. I'm the CEO and founder of Pista Enterprises. We're located in Tokyo, Japan, with offices in Seoul and Australia. Today in this podcast, we're going to learn about the importance of expanding your market and to the APAC markets and Asia in general in order to increase your commercial value in those markets. And also start having a conversation with patients and doctors about exciting new products and technology that's available in the US and that could be available outside of the States.
orthomarketing.com, 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.
Well, hello everybody out there in podcast land. This is Dean Steinman from Ortho Marketing, and guess what? We are back with another podcast for you. And I am very excited to have an old friend back for us on the podcast. Those of you who have been following us for a while have seen this face before. You've heard him talk, and real excited to have back with me Paul Capodanno. Paul. I've got back a long time from some of the other big companies worked with, and Paul is now the CEO and founder of this great new company that called Pista Enterprises, and we're here to talk a little bit about what's going on in the orthodontic world and worldwide, preservation out there. So, Paul, how are you today?
Very good, Dean. Very good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks so much for jumping back on. We've done this many times before in your previous, lives in the ortho world here, and I appreciate you jumping back on again. So why don't you give us a little update of what's been new in your life, and I'd love to learn a little bit more now about international orthodontic products and expansion worldwide, and tell us a little about Pista Enterprises. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me today.
Sure.
It's a pleasure always to talk to you, Dean. A few months ago, actually, going on a year plus now, we looked at the markets in the US, and we're talking to so many great companies in the ortho world, digital workflow solutions for braces, retainers, aligners. And then so we've seen an interesting development in the US market, but more importantly, an appetite for those companies to go international. And some of them, the very large ones, your Omco and Align Technology, and others are already well in those countries, especially in APAC. But we also discovered then there's a very interesting ways for the smaller ones or the startups that actually want to develop their international presence specifically in APAC. So with quite a few people behind the scenes over the past year and a half or so, we've kind of studied the market, talked to various associations and government and Ministry of Health and others, and of course doctors and technicians there. And we decided to actually bring a very interesting cohort of companies in those markets in 2024 and beyond. So we built a team over there, which is very similar to what you would see in the US, with sales and customer supports and training and educations and KOLs. And now we're to a point where we're ready to unleash all those great companies.
Oh, great. So, what was the deciding force behind this? What did you see that was needed, and and what pushed you to take this step?
It's interesting because especially in ortho, those markets are a little behind, not necessarily from a technology standpoint, but the understanding of the added value of digital orthodontics. So that includes software like DentalMonitoring, all the way to 3D digital braces and retainers. And so what happened with that is we discovered, and there's a cultural aspect of the ortho treatment that is much better than it was even 5 years ago. So people have more access to those treatments. And there is a big push from various associations, government entities to actually make this more accessible to patients. And with that in mind, we discovered that really there's not a lot of structure in place, no really end-to-end solutions, where you have a lot of people trying to go with distributors but there's not really an end-to-end solutions for a company that is walking through from an initial consultations with companies like DentalMonitoring, agreeing all the way to a retainer program. And with that in mind, we decided to actually make this as a full digital workflow that would help the practice go from one end to the other, extend the life basically of a patient journey, but also providing the right technology and the right products and solutions to those patients in those clinics where they're now more advanced in terms of understanding technology and patient experience and a better care in general. And we just looked at several. There's a lot of companies that have brackets and braces, which is a lot of company with aligners and retainers, but there's not really anybody that comes in as from A to Z and kind of hold the hands of a practice from the day someone says I'm looking for a treatment all the way to 2 or 3 years after the treatment is over with retainers. So that's really why we've done this. And then also from changing the industry there is an interesting concept for us because of it's a national health insurance, which means pretty much everything's covered in those markets.
Right.
But for orthodontic treatment, not a lot is covered. So we're also working with the Japanese government, the Ministry of Health, both in Japan and Korea, to actually change that and to make this more affordable to more patient. And that's a very exciting project for us because we want to be on the forefront of changing the industry. But it's not easy.
No, and it certainly isn't. Yeah. This podcast is sponsored by orthomarketing.com. Hey, you an orthodontist or dentist looking to give your practice the competitive edge it deserves? Well, look no further than Ortho Marketing. Ortho Marketing is the dentist and orthodontist choice for digital marketing. At Ortho Marketing, we specialize in helping orthodontists and dentists just like you attract more new patients. Our team of experts knows the ins and outs of the dental and orthodontic industry, and we're here to help your practice shine. We're going to supercharge your online presence. We're going to optimize your website. We're going to harness the power of social media to connect you with the patients that you want. Say goodbye to empty chairs and say hello to a thriving practice. Choose Ortho Marketing today and watch your patient list grow. Visit orthomarketing.com and learn more and take the first steps towards your practice success. Ortho Marketing. It's not just our name, it's what we do. So let's talk a little bit about change. Obviously we've spoken about that many times in the past with you as far as adapting to change and what have you. So what is the pulse in Asia as far as adapting to change? Because in the U.S., the scariest thing is change. All right, nobody likes to nobody wants to try the unknown. Nobody wants to adapt. You've been doing something, especially in dental orthodontic, you're doing something for years and years and years, and there's not much that we've seen a huge seismic shift in digital, making things digital and making things to more accessible. But how are companies open to adapting in the Asian market compared to in the US? Are they more open to it, or are they more afraid of it?
Well, I think we have the same issue that you've seen in the US, you and me, over the years. I think that as soon as you introduce something that is disruptive a little bit in terms of how people do treatment and how people needs to be trained and everything that is attached to technology. I think in Asia specifically, the fear is not necessarily the technology, but it's the it's the way it's been explained to patient. And then there's also huge amount of compliance and registrations in terms of software. is obviously they're very, very not necessarily worried, but intrigued by anything that is attached to data. And then
Right.
with that in mind, it's a little bit of a slower process to make them understand that a software is actually a good thing and not spying on patients or reselling patient information. 3D printing is not necessarily something that is a bad thing, right? So they're a little bit adverse to the change, just like we've seen in the US, but they're very, very excited about it. And so we've seen it with AAO this year. We actually brought about 30 doctors from APAC. In the background, I don't think a lot of people noticed that they were here with us, but they were. And so they were very excited about looking at, software for, detections, anything that is attached to a digital workflow, interesting solutions like custom 3D braces, because that doesn't necessarily exist in those markets, or a very, very small percentage. But they came back with lots of feedbacks and lots of very quality interactive comments that allowed us to go to larger entities in the government or health insurance to show that there is actually an interest. So now the work really starts to get the doctor excited about this new technology, but it's also very exciting for us to work with those companies because there is obviously a language barrier. There is, it's a slower pace over there. It's very cautious. But once they really understand the added value of those products and solutions, it's a very, very interesting market. And so we're very excited to bring, some of those solutions to Japan and Korea, and then expanding to Thailand and Singapore and potentially Australia as well.
So if you can educate us a little bit on the main cultural differences between the patients in the U.S. and in the Asian market, because we just spoke a little bit about companies that are willing to adapt and welcome change. Are patients the same, or are they more, closed and not open to it? So what are the two differences?
So, it's very interesting, Dean. I was even surprised because I've been in the industry for a little while, but, you learn something new every day. And so what we've discovered is the culture of orthodontic treatment is interesting because originally it was not necessarily something that people would do to get a better smile or straighter teeth or something like this. It was actually attached to education. And by that, I mean that people in those countries wants to learn English, for example, and certain words are hard to pronounce when your teeth are not aligned correctly. So it's interesting that in school, because teenagers and preteens and young adults learning English, their teacher would say, you need to go see your dentist or your orthodontist and fix your teeth so you can speak English better. Really? And then, so it's very interesting how this is attached to something that's, basically different from what you can see in the US, where it's like you need to have straighter teeth because your smile is going to look better on picture. Right. So that started with that, maybe 6-7 years ago, a little bit more than that. But it also evolved with Western culture into what it's called the Hollywood smile, right? Which is perfect teeth. And then, so that's the reason why some of the companies like Align Technology came into the market early on, because the other part of the cultural difference is they don't want big, bulky metal braces in their face and in their mouth. Right. It's not looked at very appealing and potentially showing almost like an issue instead of a treatment. So the aesthetic side of the orthodontic treatment actually starting to be very interested for the patients. What can I put in my mouth that it's not very, very visible, that people really don't notice when I take the subway in a busy day in Tokyo, Japan, where I can still fix my teeth, but it's not really, in your face as look at all this metal that I have in my mouth. Right. So one of the reasons why it worked well with Align technology is because the invisible treatment was a great solution.
Yes.
Um, but also because of the lack of training or the lack of understanding on how those treatment worked, patients started to notice that the finishes on those cases were not as good as expected, and they still had issues with that when they still had to come back and eventually had a more permanent braces treatment, like the traditional braces treatment. So it was a little bit counterproductive, but it also opened the market to 3D printed full custom braces. Companies like Lightforce, for example, or even KLOwen, because they basically on the aesthetic side, specifically with Lightforce, they have a solution when it's still clear appliance. So you don't really see those, and it actually sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes work better than the aligners. And because the treatment is shorter and it's almost has the same price as an Align technology product, they're starting to consider this alternative. And so we saw this very early on in the process of what can we bring to the market that is an alternative, not necessarily competition, but an alternative to people that said, I want to try something more, still customized, but really also that works well. And so that's and it's aesthetically pleasing still.
Sure. You mentioned a couple of other big disruptors just recently with KLOwen and for Lightforce, and I've had both CEOs on my podcast before. And I've had many, disruptors and new and technology partners out there. So a company like them or others are listening. Why should the U.S. company be looking at the Asia market, and how hard is it to get entrenched into that market there? Because especially cultures are different, monetarily different, et cetera. So A, let's talk about why they should be looking at it, and B, how hard is it to get foothold in the new market like that?
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's, obviously the market is enormous there. Not that the US market is not, obviously it's a very big market, right? But I think the adoption rate in Asia is faster once compliance, homologation, the filings of the right documents is done, which is not easy. And that's one of the reasons why those companies reach out to us, is because we have a full compliance department. We work very closely with association, the Japanese Association of Orthodontists, or the Korean one, Ministry of Health, so we have an entire team that helps them understand and navigate through all this compliance. So they don't really have to do it themselves because it's different languages, and it's, there's no filing online. You have to physically go there and explain, so there's a lot of a cultural adaptations that you have to do. But I think from a commercial standpoint, when you look at companies like Lightforce, for example, what they've done in Australia already is amazing. And, you have companies like DentalMonitoring that's already in Japan. You have other companies that are starting to be interested in there. But it's also, part of a roadmap for them to expand their product and services in countries where there's not a ton of competition, and sometimes there's none. There's not a lot of people that actually go after that because it's complex. And then so it also, for them as part of a successful development of a company, to start planting flags in Europe and in APAC is a natural process for them to actually go and look at Asia. And Japan is a big market. I mean, you have probably 2.5-3 million cases a year, in those markets. So it's not a small market. It's very well defined in terms of the potential. And while not everybody qualifies, just because you also have to have kind of a background in technology and understand, the value and the value prop of those products, there's still a very, very big market to be taken. And, there's a reason why Align Technology came to APAC, 8 years ago, and now just starts looking at, the fruit of their labor. So even if it's not tomorrow, 2, 3, 4 years from now, the companies that are there now will be in a very, very good position to compete and grab a big chunk of the market.
How hard is it to get a share of the market for a company that is not native to Asia? Are they shunned or are they welcomed? And how hard is it to get that without understanding the culture?
Right. So this is always an issue, right? I think that if you don't have the Japanese culture, for example, it's hard to have conversations with doctors. So our staff, for example, is 100% Japanese. They're bilingual. So one of the reasons we do this is because having Japanese, sales directors and implementation specialists, really helps that conversation, and they also understand the culture. So it's not it's not a bunch of people from Texas or Boston's or Florida that comes there and try to impose, the commercial standards that they have in the US. It's completely redesigned by our team to really adapt to the culture. And so once that's done, outside of translations and, those kinds of things, and marketing, it's a really good it's a really good conversation, and it moves fairly fast. The other part of it is the culture of getting successful U.S. made or U.S. founded products in Asia has a great connotation of success, and compared to products that would come from China, for example, right? So so working, for when we were evaluating the companies to bring, something that is made in the U.S., that is, the lab is in the U.S., the product is made and designed in the U.S., has a great value to the doctors in general, and not because, they don't want to deal with China, but there's still, from a cultural standpoint, the quality and the ability for those guys to produce something that's consistent and good really helps the marketing, the sales, and everything else around it.
So, final question. So, if a company is looking to expand outside the U.S., they have so many options. You mentioned Australia before. You mentioned Europe. You have Asia. Why should somebody choose Asia over another? Like, what would be the benefit of it? Is it just the opportunity, the growth? Because all these markets have big potential,
right?
And obviously have the right partner like Pista in order to be able to facilitate it,
right?
But if somebody wanted to take the first step and just even look at options, what's the best way for them to do so? Like to do market research or to do projections. How would they even go about doing something like that to determine, okay, we're a U.S. company, we're killing it here, but now we want to expand internationally. Well, internationally is a big place. So how do they determine where to go next?
Right. So, I think you're right. This is the right partner. You start with the right partner, right? Trying to do this by yourself from a place in Texas without the language, without anything else, it's hard, right? You have to be there. There's a few things, but I think in terms of commercial deployment, when you look at companies that are successful in the U.S. and say, hey, what else can we do now? Looking at Asia, I would take APAC as the largest scale, which includes China eventually, right? But even if you look at Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Australia, the adoption rate of new product and new technology is faster than some of the countries, for example, in Europe. They have another set in Europe. They have another set of requirements and compliance and homologations of product that sometimes slows down the process. and
Just less red tape.
there's less red tape. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
then a bigger appetite to actually learn about something that is new, as long as it's not completely disruptive when you have to, redo pretty much everything you're doing. But that's the same in the US when
Right.
company comes here with a new software or anything new, practices look at it, it's like, oh, that's another software. Oh, that's another tool. And how long is this going to take to learn? And, things like this. But motivations for in Asia is actually higher from what we've seen, which is
Good.
interesting.
Good.
And then on the other thing also is sometimes in Europe, American companies have a harder time getting there because it's an American company, and in Europe they try to support their own companies first, and in Asia
Well, that's
that
welcoming. Right.
that conversation happens less. Obviously, they want to, have companies, let's just say in Japan, but if there is none, or the ones that are there don't necessarily have the right product or the right solution, the next country that they turn to is actually United States. So if you're a very successful United States American company, and you're at AO, your marketing is good, the people behind has the vision, it's actually easier to get them into APAC than other part in the world, and that's why you'll see, DentalMonitoring is a European company, but take a look at Lightforce, for example. Why would you not go to France or Germany before you go to Australia, where Australia is a faster market for them to
Right.
to get in, right? With limited
Right.
competition. And so we've seen the same in other part of Asia and Southeast Asia, where there's a really an interesting or faster way to actually come in. But you have to
Wow.
have the right partners.
Exactly. And that's great. So, Paul, this has been awesome. This is great information. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.
So if somebody is looking to go into the Asian market, and then there, any of the, companies that listen to us, and everybody who does, thank you so much for listening to the Ortho Marketing Podcast. We appreciate your support. What would be the best way for somebody to reach out to you, to pick your brain, to see if you're a good match, to see if you might be able to help them, and just talk with you as far as your expertise? So how would somebody reach out to you to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely give them our websites, pistaenterprises.com. There's a contact form in there. We have a pretty not necessarily complex process, but not everybody that comes to us, and it's been many since AO actually this year, should be considering this. There's many factors to if you're an aligner company, or if you're a dental product of any kind. We do an extensive research to see what's feasible, what's not. Obviously pricing structures and taxes and compliance and filing. So, but we do consultation with our team, and then there's a process in place that usually takes about 3 weeks for us to really determine if it's a valuable
Good match
project for both companies. But after that, we basically take absolutely everything from A to Z. We have an advertising agency that's there. We have we have all the marketing, we have sales, we have customer support. So that's usually pretty good for those companies, because we can achieve that as a fraction of the cost. So if they were actually trying to do this on their own, at least in the early stage of entering those markets. But start with
the right partner is so important. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So they can contact us through the website, obviously, and then we can go from there.
Right. And the guys, there'll be a link in the notes here to it, so you could reach out accordingly there. And Paul's great. I've known him for years. Great guy, very well connected, very smart, and he can help you. So if you're looking to take your company to a new market, to the next level, definitely reach out. And this is a huge opportunity here. So Paul, thanks so much, man, for joining again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dean.
I thank you so much, and everybody out in podcast land, please check them out. Again, thank you so much for your support, everybody out there. We always love to hear feedback. We love to hear comments. So if you have any questions about the show or any others, please let us know. So Paul, thanks so much. Everybody
you.
in podcast land, thank you so much for watching, supporting us. Everybody be happy, be safe, and keep smiling. Thank you. Bye-bye.
orthomarketing.com. 360-degree digital marketing solutions for your practice.